the next slide. Okay, so here's what we do. When we talk about laying out this calendar, really what we do is we start with what we call the big picture in mind. And what we mean by the big picture in mind is that every one of you, whether you actually have a calendar or not, there's key activities that happen every year. You have strategic planning, or you have a management meeting, or you have a board meeting, or you have performance reviews that have to take place. All of those things are some of your key activities that are part of your strategic planning process. And what you're going to find is that certain of those are grouped around different parts of the year, because there really is some seasonality in your business. But there's also seasonality in terms of all the activities that you're committed to during the course of the year. And you'll see that when I give you an example in a couple of minutes, you're going to see how that gets lumped in, and you'll see that there's certain times of the year where, you know what, you're really busy, and there's certain times where you're less busy. That's when we want to work on the business improvement stuff. So the benefit of seeing this visually will be that you can sort of say, you know what, here's a couple of months where we're not quite as busy, where we can really work on the business. And that's really what we need to do. And your job as a CEO or an executive in your company is to really make sure that the organization is not taking on too much at any one point in time. It's your job to make sure to throttle back on all of the working on the business stuff if we're really just too busy. So the idea behind this is it gives you that picture, and that's really where we want to be able to drive next. So here's what we do when we work with companies, and what we're going to encourage you to do, even as you work on this with your own, is start with your current system. And we're going to show you, we're going to give you a worksheet. We're going to give you something that you're going to be able to use with your team. But the idea is try to lay out what your current system is. So we do performance reviews this time of the year. We do our strategic planning this time of the year. We do quarterly planning these times of the year. And you sort of build out. We meet with our board or our investors at these various points during the year. What you want to do is start out with, we all have it, whether we've documented it or not, but lay it out. And I'm going to show you a tool in a second that we're going to use. The second thing is, then you got to consider, hey, what am I missing? So a lot of what we work with organizations on is less about what they're currently doing. It's more about, well, what else should we add to our management system? What else should we get on the calendar if we're really going to really build out our management system? Then you have this little thing called strategy. And with strategy outcomes, you'll ultimately find that there's other things that we want to add into the year, things that we want to work on the business. And so when you add all that together, now you say, okay, let's create the calendar, and let's look at what that might look like. So this is an example of looking at a finished calendar. So I want to paint a picture for you about what we're trying to get at, and then ultimately I'm going to go back and I'm going to take you through a worksheet that I think is going to be very beneficial for you. So this is a finished one. It just so happens to be for us, and honestly, we would add a couple of other things to it over time, but we wanted to paint a picture. And what you can honestly see here is that this is how our year's laid out. This is our management system in action. We can see that there's certain times like May and June where we have a little bit less going on. Great time to be working on the business, right? You can also see November and December, although you're challenged with the holidays, a little bit lighter for us. What you can see is that January and February, let's not take on a lot more stuff. September, let's not take on a lot more stuff. We've got big things that happen in our organization that are really critical that time of year. And so what this does is it just gives you a quick picture along those lines. And so we think laying out basically your management system in something like this is really valuable. But how do we get to this? That's really what I want to take you through next. What we want to do is we want to lay out in a worksheet, and we're going to share this worksheet with you and show you how to go through it, and that'll be the example we'll give you next, is that there's regular events that you have. Maybe there's key conferences in your industry, things of that nature, in addition to what you're doing in your organization. The second question is, really more than anything, what are we missing? Are there strategy events? Are there culture events? Are there leadership? Are there surveys that we need to do? Are there scorecards we need to build? Is there compensation reviews? Are there performance reviews? Things of that nature that we don't currently have built into our system that we really need to build into our system. And then, as I mentioned, then you get into, and then we need to lay out what are the key projects that we have. in the upcoming year. And you'll see that in the example that we use, what that really means. But these are the meaningful, really big, critical projects that we want to take on in the upcoming year. Is there any trading that needs to be done? And ultimately, after you lay all that out, you're going to see where your bottlenecks are. I just referenced them in that finished calendar that I shared with you. But there are certain times where there's relief opportunities, like I mentioned for us, May, June, November, December. And then there's bottlenecks. That's January, February, and September, big bottlenecks. And so what we're really trying to do ultimately by laying it out on this worksheet is really see where those bottlenecks and where those relief opportunities are. So this is an example of a management system laid out in a calendar. And a couple things that I've highlighted here for you is that what you see in yellow are what I consider to be the lighter months. So I'm going to call those relief opportunities, right? I mentioned that January and February are real busy, intensive stuff. We're rolling out our new programs during the course of the year. By the way, GrowCo's us. I'm sure you figured that out. But that's just to use an example here. And then obviously September, October gets really busy for us, as you can see on this particular calendar. But what I've tried to highlight is that the months of, March, May, June, November, December, we have a little bit more time to work on the business as a team. And again, you're thinking about this as a team, not you as the leader or you in your particular circumstance. It's a valuable tool for that as well, but this is really about the organization. And so what we do is, and the way we got here to this, and then everything you see in green, let's assume that we've never really had a performance review process, a compensation review process, et cetera. And what we've tried to do is say, when? As I said before, March is light, so that's when we're going to do our performance reviews and our compensation reviews. December's a little light. June and December are a little bit light. That's when we're going to do our marketing review with our marketing firm. And we're really going to go through that. So it really helped us. If I'm adding those four pieces to my management system, it helps me see what are the best months for that and how I can factor that in. So let's go down below, Rachel, the second part of the worksheet. Second part of the worksheet is what we call a description of those calendar activities. And the reason why you do this is that it really gives you a picture of how intensive they are. So all things aren't created equal, even though they're line items up on the calendar. The reality is that it may take a lot more time to do an annual strategy refresh than it might take doing something else. And so you really want to try to flesh out here, what is the intensity of the stuff that you're going to be working on? And that's really why it really helps you just clarify in your own mind what the intensity is going to be. Drop down below, Rachel, in this third part of the worksheet. This is where you lay on, okay, the additional things. So I'm using this example. We've had performance management reviews on a regular basis, but let me just paint a picture for you. This would be an example of answering those questions that I said need to be built in. So what additions do I have to have in our management system? Well, again, hypothetically, we need to add our performance review process. We need to add our compensation review process, and we need to add semi-annual marketing progress reviews. We're going to do those in June, December. So now I go back up to my calendar and I take a look at, well, when can that fit in? And you can see what I did. Those are all highlighted in green, right? Let's drop back down again, Rach, to that same. The second part of it is to say, well, what are the things I really want to work on this upcoming year that are big, that are difference makers? And generally, this comes out of our strategy process. We want to implement a new CRM. We want to convert to a new project management system. We're building out all of our online programs. So we're working specifically on a CEO development program. So we've got tons of video recording that we're doing there. And then we like to have on a regular basis leadership training for our team. So those are key things that I need to be able to fit in, work on the business. And obviously we have more, but just for purposes of this exercise to really show you. And so what we've tried to do is think about, and the next step in the process would be to say, well, when should we do that? And I'm going to take you up there in a minute. You also try to, on this worksheet, identify where are your biggest bottlenecks. Generally, one of our biggest bottlenecks, many of you work with us on annual and quarterly planning. Well, there's a certain time frame where we've got to get that done for all of our clients. And so that period of time is off limits in terms of us being able to work on our business or us being able to work on our annual planning. You'll see that I do annual planning for our company in January. Most of the companies we work with, we do it in November and December because they want to be ready for the beginning of the year. So we have to alter that because that is a bottleneck for us. That's something that has to be done in a certain time frame for all of our clients. Also, you could see as we looked at the calendar up above before, January and February, as I mentioned. So first quarter, we've got bottlenecks. We've got a lot of stuff coming out of we get all of our new programs in the spring and all of them in the fall. So we're coming out. So generally we find that, January, February, September, October, real bottlenecks for us. What we do see is relief opportunities, though, as I mentioned before, that they're in May and June, they're November, December, and March. So this is what you'd work through with your team to say, hey, what are the key things that we need to add to our management system? What are the key projects, things that we want to work on the business? Where are our bottlenecks? Where are relief opportunities? Let's not make our bottlenecks worse by now all of a sudden piling on and adding lots more projects and stuff. And maybe during that particular quarter, you just lighten the load in terms of the strategic initiatives you take on because you can sort of see that that's laying out for you. The other notes is just for other notes, okay? I want to go back to what I said right out of the blocks. Why is this important? A, it helps you as if you're the ultimate leader in your organization, really think through, okay, where can I really enlist the company to work on the business? That's one thing. Number two, if you have other stakeholders out there and they call you and they say, hey, we'd like to do our regular marketing review with you. We happen to have a really good marketing firm we work with. We love working with them. Well, we want to tell them, hey, this is when we can do it. We can do it in June. We can do it in December. So it helps you manage I'll call it your partnership or vendor relationships that you have. Third thing it does, if you have investors, investors always want to go, 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 go. Let's get more done. Let's get more done. Let's get more done. This helps you manage expectations for them. They can say, hey, why can't we get that done, in this next 2 months? Well, because, January and February, we're buried alive. We got so many other things that we're really trying. So it's not reasonable. Realistically, we can take that on in May and June. You follow me? So it really helps you manage expectations with your investors, other stakeholders, perhaps your board of directors, if you have a board of directors. And so we think, but most importantly, if you're the ultimate leader of the organization, your job is to figure out when do I put more pressure on the organization to work on the business and when do I pull us back a little bit from time to time. And I think that this visual tool, and it's not just this visual part, like I said, the descriptions are really important because it helps you think through it. But and then what I like to do is sort of layer on as we go through the strategy process each and every quarter, we figure out, okay, well, realistically, so let's just say that we were in the third quarter and we know that September and October and we're doing our quarterly planning, let's say just before this, right in sort of the September timeframe. And we're coming up with a whole list of, here's 5 big things that we want to take on. Realistically, what we want to say is that, how many of those can we really take on when we're looking at September and October like they are? This is probably going to be a little bit lighter quarter. And truthfully, it's going to be November and December focused. That's really where we're going to end up getting it done. So don't put more pressure on your organization. Instead, try to really think through when you're going to put pressure on the organization. Questions? Let me, and then what I'm going to ask all of you to do is maybe there's some things that you're doing to really manage the expectations of your organization and communicate to your organization. And maybe we'll get some ideas from each other. But how about questions on this process, questions on the value, how we use it, anything along those lines?
I got a couple thoughts, not really crystallized, but I'll just kind of talk out loud, think out loud. One thing I noticed, and it got me questioning, one of the symptoms of us at our organization is that our managers express that they feel exasperated. There's never enough time in the day, and it's never going to change. And, we're infatuated with progress, as most of us are with our organizations. And so we're trying to push things forward. But we haven't given thought to this management system calendar. And, we have a big month for us is June, as I think about it, and having reviews against our strategy, performance reviews. There's also a Gallup survey that happens at that time. There's listening that needs to happen from that and lessons learned from that. And I'm wondering now if we need to challenge the traditional mid-year sort of time frame for when we do these reviews, because I don't know if it needs to happen then. Just sort of an arbitrary time that we pick because it's the middle of the year as we define a year, but it doesn't have to happen then. So I'm thinking about different ways to flex that now and potentially reduce some of that exasperation that the managers are saying that they feel. So more of a comment, but I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah. So Casey, here's the thing, it's very interesting. One of the companies we just worked with on reworking it, when we got all this laid out on a calendar, they were like, wow, we need to move things and let's not be tied into how we've always done things. Let's instead try to get the rhythm right for the organization. And so you can challenge a lot of it, but one of the benefits is that if you sat down with the executive team that you have and just laid this out and said, here, we're bottlenecked like crazy in this summer time frame. We've always thought it's great to do it in the summer because that's a good time when, maybe we're not going to conferences, we're not doing other things. But we've really turned that into sort of a catch basin for everything. And now we're buried alive there. And so what I find is if we can go back, Rachel, to that worksheet again, right at the top. And let me just, point this out because this is, this would be an example for us is that what we should start thinking about when you look at, when you look at our stuff is that you can all of a sudden take this, and you don't see this on this one, but, with companies when we work with, sometimes what we'll do is we'll highlight in red and we'll say, consider moving it to May or consider moving it to June. And it's a good way to talk with the executive team. And then ultimately, even your employees might say, well, why are we changing performance reviews from June? It's always been in June. Well, this is why, it's always been in June. But look at how busy we are in June, not on this calendar, but on yours, Casey. But what we want to do is we want to move them back to May so that we can do a better, more thoughtful review than what we've been doing. And so it just gives you an opportunity to be able to sort of look and move it around a little bit. Like I said, the visual is a big deal because most of us, the way we work through strategy and why I think this is a game changer for companies if they adopt it is that when you make those long lists during strategy work or whatever, that here's the things we're going to get done this year. And even if you break it down and you do quarterly planning and you say, these are the key things, what you're missing is all the other stuff that we've committed to doing during the course of the year or during the course of that quarter. And this creates that visual for all of a sudden you look at it and you say, you know what, when we work on our quarterly initiatives, we're going to be light this quarter, but we're going to put our foot on the pedal in the third or the fourth quarter, and that's what it enables you to do. So rather than you even taking on the burden to say, hey, I've got to figure this out, one of the things I would recommend is that, you sort of populate this, take a first shot at it for your organization and then sit down with your executive team and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I feel like we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. We're probably not doing great performance evaluations because we're trying to just jam it in with everything else we're doing. It's one of the most important things we do is our performance reviews. So I want to move that to a different time frame. Again, then you share it. You can even go so far to share it with your employees and just say, hey, the reason why we're switching this is I want to share with you our corporate calendar. This is what we're really looking at. This is the rhythm we're trying to get in. And we just think we're bottlenecked there. And we want to be able to change things and make it a more meaningful for you. People will ride with you on that as long as they understand the logic. So that's where I think, so if you think about your annual planning, coming out of annual planning, and which is generally when you identify what are the things we want to work on our business, it's a great way to just lay this out and then say, okay, when do we want to slay this stuff? You can also set your year up that way. So even on the annual planning, you're going to identify there's a few big things we want to get done. Well, in my world, when do I want to get that done? I want to put my foot on the pedal in May and June and probably November and December. That's when I feel comfortable I can put pressure on our organization.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, this is Rich Sleesman.
Hey, Rich.
How you doing?
Love seeing you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Believe me, good to see anybody these days. Although I like being live, not these boxes again.
Yeah.
But when I look at this process here, what I take away from this, besides the larger organizational piece of it, is the fact that it creates opportunity for the management leadership team to sit down at the beginning of the year and actually triage what we think is important for the year coming up. And sometimes meetings we're putting on the calendar may not be important enough to actually make this calendar. And it forces the conversation among leadership as to what really are the key must-do items for the year versus things that we'd like to get done, or maybe people have their pet projects they want to have on here. But effectively, this creates the opportunity for the leadership team to agree upon what are the key items to make this calendar.
Absolutely. Rich, I can't, so again, we can only work on so much. I mean, what strategy is about is figuring out where we want to spend our precious time and energy in the upcoming year. It also makes you think about, Rich, as you look at this calendar, you might say, well, something that we've got on here that takes up a lot of our time, I forgot to mention that earlier, honestly, should come off the calendar because it competes for, other things. And, what we really want to do is we want to be working on the most important things. So I think it really helps your team think through. It's like, yeah, we want to implement a new project management system. Okay. Exactly when are we going to do that? I know we all want to do that. We know it's all important, but is it more important than some of these other standard things that we've got to get done, as well as some other key projects? So it does help you prioritize. And unfortunately, like I said, Rich, what I see a lot of companies do is that when you're doing your annual planning, you're optimistic for the year. You're thinking about all the things that we can get done. But then when you sort of lay it out and say, okay, well, this calendar really helps you think through the when. When are we going to do it? And in some instances, the answer might be, you know what, we can't do all 5 of those things. We can only do these 3 things. And so these other 2 are going to, so I think it's a great prioritization tool. It just works a little bit different. It's one thing when you go through the strategy process and you rate sort of impact versus risk, which is a process we use a lot to really identify what are the best opportunities for us to pursue. But then when you lay it out, what most people really underestimate is the amount of time it's going to take and where are we going to find that time, as an organization. And, lots of organizations, they get very exasperated. It's like, we're trying to do too much. I hear that all the time. We think this is another tool that helps you sort of rein that in and make sure that we're not pursuing too much and that we are prioritizing. So thank you, Rich. That's awesome. Eric, any thoughts on this one?
Good morning. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. I like this tool, and we've been working a lot lately on our meeting rhythm. And so the meeting rhythm is more kind of short term. And so this kind of naturally flows with the short-term meeting rhythm. You can look out into the future and plan a little bit better. So I like this tool from that regard. The other piece that I was thinking about, if we're looking at this from a real high level at the executive level, this is great, but there's also, I think, some power in each department going through an exercise like this and seeing where their bottlenecks are, because the company level bottlenecks may be significantly different than some of the individual departments. And so how do we navigate that? And I think having visibility to all that information is going to help us to make better decisions.
That's a great point. That is a great point. We haven't really taken it to that level yet, but I think you're dead on. I think it would make sense. When you think about it, as Rich said before, it's really a prioritization tool as much as anything. But it starts out by getting some agreement, probably at the executive team level, of what we're going to slay this upcoming year and what we're going to commit to. But I could easily see this being used. Bruce, what do you think on that?
I fully agree. I think that anything that fosters thinking ahead and understanding where our workload is, that can provide opportunity to redistribute or think differently about how we're doing things, that levels the load. Especially as Casey said, most of the customers we're meeting with, especially lately, are feeling overwhelmed with too much. And any tool that can help us mitigate that through thoughtful planning and discussion is going to help us. And then just the visibility of it also helps as an accountability tool to make sure we're getting at the most important stuff. So I think going down to the department level, like Eric said, it's a great idea.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is view this as being an example. We're talking about an example. Every business is different. The complexity, the things that are going to be really important to you. Some organizations are going to have, you know, monthly financial reviews and other things that are going to be really important to them. So view this as just being sort of an example. But I mean, really starting with the blank sheet, which, you know, we're going to send you that worksheet. We're going to also send you this one so you can use it as an example. But you know, I think you know it's very powerful, and I think using it at the next level, Eric, would be awesome. I really do. I think it could add a lot. And ultimately, what we want to do is we want to get to a point where everyone's really clear on it. And so this next slide that you see up here is an example. You might say, so when I say everyone, you know, obviously as a CEO, that's your job to figure out, you know, how many, you know, who we're going to share this with. But, you know, Casey, if I'm your organization, it's sort of like, hey, here's where, you know, I want to set the pace for the organization. Let's just assume we just came out of strategic planning. We want to be able to lay out for them. Let me paint a picture for our year. Okay. We're going to be really busy in January and February coming. Let's assume this was yours, Casey. We're going to be really busy in January and February coming out of the blocks. We're not going to be able to work a lot on the business. We're getting our new programs launched. We've got, you know, a board of directors meeting. We've got this, we've got that. It's just going to be, we're going to be very, very busy. But what we are going to do is really when we get into March, we got to make some really good progress on a couple of key things. And then when we get into May and June, I know a lot of people are moving towards summertime, but we've got to really focus on, that's when we can really work on the business and really make some big things happen. And then, you know, November and December, I know a lot of people are going to be going to holiday parties. We're going to be doing that as well. But we're really hoping that we can get X, Y, and Z done during that period of time. You can set the year up for your team and your organization so that when all these things are happening, they have a real good feel for why. It's because this is the rhythm of our organization. This is when we have the bandwidth to be able to work on the business, not just in the business. And so, so that's why we like to use, you know, so when we say share so everyone knows, we think there's a lot of power in that in terms of being able to share and set up the year and set expectations for where we're going to make progress. Eric, you might, as you said before, use this even for the departments, but, you know, you can lay it out. We like a nice layout for this, and we think it's very valuable. So we're moving towards sort of the end here, but let's just take a quick look at the exhibits that we talked about today. So we're going to be sending you this worksheet, gang. Let me show you again the worksheet. The worksheet where you can schedule out the key management activities. You're going to, as part of that, you'll have down below, if you can go down to the second part of it, a real description of what are all those activities that are in our corporate management system, if you will. And then lastly, your real thought process is where you're going to talk about what are the things we need to add to our management system, what are the big projects we're going to take on this year, where do we see our bottlenecks, and ultimately the relief opportunities. But all of that should flow through. We're also going to send out to you guys the finished one, which is just a model for you to see. But the power of this is, Jim, when we kicked it off, I said, why is this important? Is that it helps manage expectations within the organization. It helps you see where you have opportunities to work on the business. And more important, as importantly, is where you're going to really be bottlenecked and you're not going to be able to work on the business quite as aggressively. So it sort of helps you set up your year, helps you manage investor expectations. You know, one of your partners or your vendors calls you and said, hey, I'd like to do a upcoming, you know, I'd like to do our partner review meeting. You say, hey, I can do it in May or June. That's because that works best for us. It helps you to take on additional commitments, but most importantly, it helps you not to overcommit. And you can set up your year for everyone. So we like doing this right at the back end of the strategy process. You finish annual planning, You lay out what is your existing system, all the things that you work on, and then from that, what are the key projects and when are we going to get at them this year? So this really helps you address that when. You know, can we really get stuff done? Because inevitably we always try to get too much done. All right, so let's go on to, so we're going to send all those out to you guys, okay? Let's just look at one last slide I think we had maybe here. Just some upcoming things, and then I'll take any questions. You know, we've got our winter programs. We're getting ready to start, believe it or not, we're in the middle of our fall programs, but we're going to start marketing them. So, you know, keep those in the back of your mind. And then here's the quarterly kickoff sessions that we have for the rest. So our next one's going to be in January. Then we've got April, we got July, and we got October, different topics for each one. I hope that was valuable for you. To me, this is a natural extension of the strategy process. It's a natural extension of what we call our management leadership system. And before I take questions, Bruce, anything you want to add before we address any questions that people have?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Questions, gang? Anything?